All right, we'll get underway. Welcome one and all to what I don't think we skipped any, so this should be the 25th Orienteering USA monthly forum. We're starting year 3. And in light of the fact that in a little over a year and a half, we're going to be hosting World TrailO Championships 2027, or LAOC is, but the US, it will take volunteers from beyond LAOC, beyond California, I'm sure. In light of that, and the fact that there hasn't been a lot of TrailO activity recently, I remember an initial flurry when the format first made its way to the States. We have Clare Durand. um, I believe she's been a member of the TrailO team for many years now, when
Yeah,
we've been
this is
naming a team, to give us an introduction to trail orienteering. Take it away.
yes. Hi, everybody. Um, so I'm Clare Durand, and I've done lots of things in orienteering, but today I'm going to talk about trail orienteering. I started trail orienteering in about the year 2000 at some events that were being put on in the U.S. Eventually, I got onto the U.S. team. My first world championship was 2008. And I've lost track. I think I've been about 7 times, including that one. There's a couple that I missed for various reasons. So today we're just going to talk about the basics. I know there are some people here who definitely know trail orienteering, looking at the names of who's signed up, but there are also some names that I don't recognize or that I don't know if they've ever been involved with trail orienteering. And we are going to be hosting the World Trail Orienteering Championships in November of 2027. And that's going to be happening in California. And we'd love to have as many people as possible involved in that. So we want to try to get clubs excited about maybe putting on some local trail orienteering, and also get people excited who might want to come out here and help out at the World Championships when we do it. So what is trail orienteering? So trail orienteering was developed in the 1990s by the IOF, specifically to be a discipline for physically challenged competitors. So people who couldn't go out running through the woods on a normal Footo course, they wanted something for them to do. So they had a group that met and tried to figure out what they could come up with, and they came up with this trail orienteering idea. And it's changed a little bit over time, both in some of the details, but also they've added more formats to it than just what we started with. So if you remember trail orienteering from the late 90s, early 2000s, you'll still recognize it, but there's some differences now. There was a World Cup in 1999. That was the first world level competition, and then the first World Championships was in 2004. For a while, they were having champs every 2 years. Then they switched to every year, and now they're back to every 2 years because they have a hard time getting hosts. So there was a World Championship this year, 2025. The next one will be the one that we put on in 2027. In trail orienteering, instead of just having a single flag with a circle on your map that you go and find, there are clusters of flags. So when you get to the spot where your circle is, there is more than one flag. So you can see in the picture that's up in the banner there are 3 flags very close together. So you would be seeing those 3 flags, but there would only be one circle on your map. And the task is to pick which of those flags matches the circle on your map. There are two different primary formats. A timed format where you are looking at flags and looking at maps very quickly and trying to go as fast as you can. And a precision format where you are allowed to move around and be more precise and try to solve problems as you move down the trail. We're going to start by talking about the timed format, because that's what more people are familiar with, because during the pandemic and just before the pandemic, they developed an online virtual way to do this. So a lot of people have been playing tempo stations online, even if they've never been to a live in-person tempo competition. In tempo, there is a viewing station and there is a chair there, so you sit down there at the viewing station. One of the things that's nice about tempo is it's very inclusively equal, right? Because if somebody's in a wheelchair, they just roll up to exactly the same spot where that chair was where you were sitting. So, and everybody sits in the same place. So there's no advantages to anyone. You sit at your viewing station. You look out into the terrain. There are 6 flags at a tempo station. So this picture that's in the banner here, this is not from a tempo station because it only is 3 flags. If you were doing tempo, there would be 6. And then they hand you a stack of maps, and they start a clock, a timer. And you are timed while you solve all of the tasks on those maps. So each map has a different circle. You flip through the maps and give answers to the course monitor who is there at the station until you finish all of the maps, which can range from 3 maps up to about 5 usually. There is a time limit that is 30 seconds per task, but it's cumulative. So, for example, if they hand you 4 maps, 4 times 30 seconds, 120 seconds, that's 2 minutes. That means you have 2 minutes to finish the stack of maps. Okay, it's not 30 minutes per map and then you have to go on to the next, 30 seconds per map and then go on to the next one. You have the total of 2 minutes for the full stack of maps. But the way they calculate it is 30 seconds per task. There is a penalty if you get an answer wrong of 30 seconds also. In the end, your score is based on combining the amount of time you took on that station plus whatever penalties you got for wrong answers. That gives you a score. Whoever is the fastest score is the winner. You usually do multiple stations in a course. So by the time you're done, you have a lot of data to try to differentiate people. This is one of our team members, Richard H. Ebright. He's from DVOA. This is him at a tempo station at this year's World Championships. You can see he's holding here a packet of maps, and we'll look more carefully at what those maps look like in a second. He's got a compass in his hand. There's some blue behind him, so he's probably sitting under a canopy. That's pretty typical that there's canopies out there just in case of rain, and also to shield competitors from each other so that they don't see and hear the answers other people are giving. All right, when you look at a tempo station, I told you there were typically 6 flags, and those flags are labeled left to right using the phonetic alphabet. This is something you have to do mentally yourself. So the first flag is Alpha, and then Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, and Foxtrot. Those are the 5 flags. When we first started this sport, people used to just say A, B, C, D. but they stopped that because somebody is listening to you. You're just giving answers, and there's a monitor there keeping track of what answers you're giving for scoring purposes. And when people were saying B, C, D, E, they all sound the same. And it was getting really hard, and things were getting messed up. People were having wrong answers recorded because the monitor couldn't tell what they actually said. So this has helped with that problem. Now that people use the words, it's easier to tell what they said and to get the right thing. Now, it's possible that you look at your map and look at the circle and look out at the flags in the terrain, and you can't find one that matches your circle. Nothing seems to be right. In that, that's okay. Sometimes the answer is 0. And if the answer is 0, then that's what you say is 0. So here's an example of a map. Now, you'll notice I haven't written tempo on this. It just says timed station. There are some times when we use timed station as tiebreakers. So this timed station map does not have a 0 on it. It just has A, B, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo. There's no Foxtrot. There's no 0 option. That's because it's just for a time station. And also, this map happens to be from a training exercise that we did that was for beginners. So we were trying not to make it too hard, so we didn't have any zeros. But this is what, so that packet that Richard was holding had probably about 4 or 5 maps that look like this. So there's a little map that can either be circular or maybe square. There's a north arrow that shows which way on that map is north. In the middle of that map, there is your actual control circle that shows where you should be looking for a flag. And then there is a control description where in the second column it tells you how many flags there are. In this case, A through E, that's 5 flags. And then this is the end of a wall, the east end of the wall. So here's a wall. So east end of that, you'd be looking for a control right about there. Now this map, notice that there's north arrows. This map is oriented to the direction that your chair is facing. The chair faces the center of the cluster of flags, and the map is oriented the same way that the chair is. Here's another example. This is an example that I screenshot from the online tempo simulator. You can see there are 6 flags. Over on the very far left is Alpha, then Bravo next to a tree, Charlie next to some sort of little wall, Delta way off in the back where you can barely see it, Echo next to some other bush, and then Foxtrot over here next to some other what looks like ruins or something like that. And then down below is the map with the north arrow and a circle. Excuse me, my Alexa seems to think I'm talking to it. So your task is to determine which one of those 6 flags do you think matches that circle. Anybody have an idea what they think? Has anybody been looking at it already? Did anybody do this competition back when we had it? I think this is one of the Hungarian ones. Mike Minium says he thinks it's a 0. Joseph Huberman says he thinks it's Foxtrot. Is there anybody who thinks it's anything other than 0 or Foxtrot? Faye Doria says Foxtrot.
Of course, we're just
So
thinking what's the best.
Ellen says
Yeah.
0.
I'm looking at the
At the road
Oh.
in the wall, it
Right.
disappears,
and it's got those lines in it.
but I don't see what those posts are.
One way those posts have to do with those lines.
I wish I could just blow this up.
Yeah, and later on we'll actually go to the site, and when you do that, you can get like a little magnifying glass thing. But this one that's on my slide is just a screenshot that can't really be blown up more than it is. So the answer to this is foxtrot.
All right.
It's a little bit tricky because since you're looking at this kind of from the side, there's like 7 of these pillars that are mapped as little round dots, and the way they line up from this direction is a little bit different than you might expect. So yes, that one is in the back, and that's the foxtrot flag is the one that is circled here.
All right, we got it.
Okay, so that's what tempo is. Are there any questions about that? We'll go and play some later. All right.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
When you're going through that pile of maps, do you have to answer them one by one, or can you flip through the whole pile and then start giving your answers?
You have to answer one before you go on to the next one.
You can't look at the second map until you've answered the first map?
That's correct. And there's usually a cover sheet, so you can't even answer the first map until they say go, and then you take the cover sheet off and work on the first one. And after you've given your answer to the first one, then you can move on to the second one.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. So the other format of orienteering is called precision orienteering. This is what anybody who's been around for a while thinks of as trail orienteering, because this is the original format, the way it was originally developed. So when we started doing trail orienteering, this is all we were doing. And when they developed the tempo, they had to come up for a different name for the existing format, and they decided to call it PRIO for precision orienteering. Oops. In PRIO, any given cluster can be up to 5 controls. In tempo, typically they're all the same. They have 6 controls. In PRIO, a cluster can vary, like the one in the picture that has 3, or there might only be 1 control, or 2, or 5, however many the course setter thought they needed to set to make a good problem. There is a viewing station, but you don't sit at the viewing station. The viewing station is simply marked for you along the trail. So you stay on a trail, and then you stop at the viewing station and look out to see the controls. But you don't have to stay at the viewing station. You're allowed to walk up and down the trail to look at the controls from other angles to make your decision. The viewing station, however, is the place from which you decide which flag is alpha and which one is bravo. So it's very important that you stop there and note what everything looks like from that point, but that might not be the best place to actually solve the task from. You're allowed to move around on the map trails as long as they're not marked out of bounds. There's usually the rules have been, we use sprint specs for the map for this. It's like a 1 to 4,000 map, sometimes blown up to 1 to 3. And you're allowed to move around on the trails. Usually the rule is you can walk on anything that's mapped as brown infill. If it's just mapped as a small trail with black dashes, those are usually out of bounds. There is a time limit for the course as a whole that is basically 3 minutes per task plus 3 minutes for every 100 meters you're going to have to walk. So they add that up. They tell you, okay, you have 2 hours to finish this. So that kind of puts people under some time pressure. If you're just doing a local event or a training just to for starters, you might not want to worry about a time limit. Just let people do it for fun. Don't worry about it. But at the championships, there's a limit. If you go over it, you lose points. So typically the impact of that, mostly people don't lose points, but people end up sometimes at the end of the course rushing through some of the last tasks, and then they might make a mistake, and so that might help differentiate competitors. There's no time limit at each individual task. At each control station, you look at the cluster. You can spend, if your time limit's 2 hours, you can spend an hour and a half on number one and then run through everything else. But you have to be done before your 2 hours is up. The scoring of this is based on accuracy. You get 1 point for each task that you get correct. And then I thought it was on this slide, but it's not. There is usually a time station that is a tiebreaker. So if two people have the same score, the tie breaking is done by who was fastest at the time station. So this is what the PRIO looks. So you saw Richard sitting in the tempo chair. When you're at a PRIO, it looks more like this. Here's the trail and a whole bunch of people who are all competitors trying to figure something out, including people in wheelchairs. And so these orange cones are the viewing stations, right? So there's one that people are using here. You can see the tip of another one. So these two viewing stations were very close together. And then there's these red and white tapes. So those are like pointing out into the terrain. So that's helping with which flags are relevant to that viewing station. It looks like this was very open terrain. This is a picture from this year's World Champs, which I was not at. Behind them on those sawhorses, those are the punch stations. So they're watching here, and then when they're ready to punch, they'll turn around and punch their answer on the punch station. Then when they finish, they'll be downloaded. So here is one of the maps from this year's World Championship, World TrailO Champs 2025, Precision O, Day 2, Part 2. So this course had about 30 controls on it. It was split up, I believe, into 3 parts. So for each part, they started your time at the start. You solved some tasks. You went to a finish, and then your time stopped. Your answers are downloaded, and then you have some time to walk from there to the next section, to the next part, where there aren't any tasks. So that's kind of how things have developed. Some of you who used to do this back in the early 2000s may remember, things like, oh, well, I'm going to run around to this trail behind the controls to look at them from there, and that's a better vantage point, or things like that. But they've really worked hard to change the course setting modes to something that means there's no advantage really to being a runner or doing something really physical, right? They're trying to make it fair for everyone. So they try to set it up so that you're mostly spending your time solving tasks and not moving back and forth on trails. So that way it's not a huge advantage to people who move better or faster. There is some advantage still to people who who are not in wheelchairs and can stand taller and stuff like that. So let's look really briefly at the control descriptions here. So numbers 10 and 11 each are just a single flag, alpha. So that means your answer has to either be alpha or 0. So 10 and 11 are kind of way up high on the hill, right? 10 is way up high near this castle or fortress or whatever that is. And 11's a little bit below that in a reentrant. And right, so you're going to find those and just say, yes, it's alpha, or it's in the wrong place, it's a 0. But there will be a flag somewhere. Then
where are you standing?
What?
Where are you standing?
out here on the trail that's on the sort of northwest side of the map, on the western on the map to the left, there's a triangle, and then so that's the start, and then there's a circle, so that's the finish. So all of the viewing stations would have been between that triangle and the double circle, between the start and the finish. So you have been standing somewhere on this trail out here, behind these buildings. That's where people would have been standing. So these are pretty far controls, right? I looked it up. The specs on a sprint map are that these lines are 120 meters apart, the north lines, and that's about the distance from the viewing area to the controls. In some cases, like number 10 is even more. So these controls are like 100 meters away or more. Some of these are clusters of A to E, and notice that 12 and 13 are very close together on the map. So they probably shared a viewing station, where you would sit, where you would see multiple flags. Oops, sorry. Where am I? Oh, there we go. So there might have been 5 flags out here, and 2 of them were near the number 12 circle, and 3 of them were near the number 13 circle, or something like that. And then 14 and 15, similarly, there were 5 flags that it was probably a shared viewing station. Otherwise, it would have been too hard at that distance to really differentiate. But I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't at this, so I'm just guessing. 16 was an alpha flag, and then 17 and 18, there was 5 flags there to figure out.
So Claire, would they ever share flags between controls?
Yes.
Usually no. Although I've been on a tempo before where there was one flag for one station that then later in the course you were that was kind of up on a hill, and later on the course you were on the other side of the same hill, and so you could see it from there, so they had to include it. And it wasn't an answer though. But it was there, so you had to remember that it was there when you were figuring out, what's Alpha and Bravo and Charlie, and I think I screwed it up because of that one.
Are you saying that?
What is the person ahead of you is at the station you are ready for? So people pretty much know that they shouldn't hang out at the viewing station very much. Typically, you go to the viewing station, you look up into the hill or into the woods and find the controls you're looking for, and then you'll step aside and look at it from other places and let other people come into the viewing station while you try to figure out which flag it is. Once you've decided what flag it is, you might go back to the viewing station to figure out whether that's Alpha or Bravo or Charlie, kind of thing. That's at least what I do. Also, typically wheelchair competitors have priority to get up close to the viewing station.
So when you said
behind them.
when you said 17 has A through E, does that mean between the 2 circles where 17 and 18 are shown on the map, there are 5 flags?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they can share a viewing station. Over here in the very last column, there's a number, and at the top it says ZT. That's called the zero tolerance. So that is telling you how many meters away a flag would have to be from the correct position before you should think of that it is a zero problem. Because these flags are so far away from the viewing station, the further away you go, the harder it is to differentiate. And so the zero tolerance here is pretty high. It gets up to 12 meters. Typically, at most events, it's only about 4 meters. You are not allowed to use binoculars or anything like that. They will, if something is far enough away and hard to see, then they will hang 2 flags there. So to make it more visible, there'll be 2 flags on one pole, so that it is a bigger thing that you're looking for. Helen asks how many flags would be in this mapped area. Again, since I was not there, I'm just assuming that a few of these share a viewing station. I think 12 and 13 probably share a viewing station, and 14, 15 probably share a viewing station, but possibly not. If that's true, there's 1, 2, 7, 12, 13, 18 flags in this area.
So Claire, when you say they share a viewing station, are you saying then that for those 2 controls, they're going to be using the same 5 flags?
Yeah, so I'm saying that when you come to this cone, the cone, it might say on it, this is 12 and 13. And then you're looking out and you're seeing 5 flags, and you answer both of those questions based on those 5 flags. There is a new format called Sprint Prio, which is still being developed in the rules, in the IOF rules. It's in Appendix 6. In Sprint Prio, this is designed to be about a half an hour long course. All of the problems are just a single flag. So you just put out 1 flag at each place, and the question is simply, is it right or wrong? Is this an alpha or a 0? You still have viewing stations for each one, so people can see where they should find the flag from. You're still allowed to move around just like in regular Prio. The scoring is still based on accuracy. There is typically a tiebreaker, which is how long did you take to make it through the course. So instead of a timed control, it's just, but in order for that to work, similarly to what we talked about before, the course needs to be very compact so that somebody who is a fast runner doesn't have an advantage. I'm going to run from this viewing station to the next one. The viewing stations and the flags would all be so close together that wouldn't make a huge difference in your time, that the bulk of the time would be spent solving the tasks. Here's an example of like a Sprint Prio course. There's 7 controls here. This was from a presentation I did at a conference for Move United, which is kind of like Orienteering USA, except for disabled sports. They have a bunch of chapters around the country that all do disabled sports stuff and adaptive sports. So here we had 7 control sites. Each one had only 1 flag, and the question was simply, you walked around on the sidewalk here and looked at each flag and figured out, is it right or wrong? For those of you who did this way back, we've already kind of talked about both of these things, but 2 things that are significantly different than they used to be. The first is that it's much more common to have a problem with just 1 flag, where the question is just, is it alpha or is it 0? And it's also much more common to have something where there's a series of flags, but more than 1 task associated with them, like we saw with circles 12 and 13 and things like that. In those cases, you need to be very careful that you don't lose track. Sometimes it'll say A to E, but when you're looking at the flags, it's kind of a cluster of 2 and a cluster of 3. And when you're looking at that second part that's the third cluster and you pick your solution, sometimes you can forget that those are really Delta Echo Foxtrot instead of Alpha Bravo Charlie. And then you end up putting the wrong answer. So be careful that you're answering the right thing and labeling the flags correctly. Okay, so we're going to play some tempo. We're going to go to the tempo simulator. I know some of you have been there. I'm sure there are plenty of people here that whose names I don't recognize from the tempo simulator, but we're going to play Christmas Day 4. So in the tempo simulator, you can make a, oh, can you see this? You're not seeing the simulator, are you?
No.
All right, let me fix that here. There it is. So you can make an account for yourself with a username and a password. And if you have that, you can log in, and then you can compete with people, and it saves your results and things like that. So I'm going to log in here, but you don't have to. If you want to, you can just go on down and click on a race and play it without having an account. Unsuccessful authentication. What didn't it like? There we go. These are notes about the current competition that's going on, the Christmas Cup. So they're having sort of an Advent competition that they've been doing this for a couple years now in December, where there's a new race every day between the 1st and the 24th. So today we're on Christmas calendar day 19. I haven't played that yet. I hope it's not too hard. We're going to go back and play Christmas Day 4. So first they give you some information about the map. You know, this is the map's 1 to 3,000. The contour interval is 2.5 meters. It's sprint spec. There's going to be 4 stations on this course. It is possible for an answer to be 0. The penalty for missing something is 30 seconds. The 0 tolerance is 4 meters. So if you think there's no flag in the right place, any flag needs to be at least 4 meters away before you want to answer 0. It's park and forest tris ruins. So these kind of places are fun. We don't have as much of this in the U.S. as they have in Europe. Smaller wooden benches and stairs are not mapped. Flags are added virtually, so the flags were photoshopped in here in order to see them better. They don't always do that. Sometimes it's a real picture with real flags. So you say, okay, I want to watch this. Loads it up. So here we have 6 flags and a little magnifier. We've got our zoom. So the zoom is not, it's not like, you can see that it's zooming on what my cursor is on. The cursor is on the alpha flag, and so you can see the alpha flag both above that zoomed circle and in the zoomed circle. So there's Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrot. And then And then there's also a Z button for 0. So you look at the map and the circle on the map, figure out which one of those flags you think is the answer, and then click the button. Anybody got an idea? Blake says no magnifiers. Well, and at the World Championships, if you were sitting in the chair at the tempo, you wouldn't be allowed to have a magnifier. But this virtual game offers this because sometimes, depending upon what screen you're using and what the resolution of the photograph is, sometimes these can be very difficult to make out. So this is a circle on the
Mike Brooks.
northwest end of the hedge. I've got some people saying they think this is a 0.
Where are we standing?
You have to kind of figure that out. So, Ellen, you said 0. Why do you think it's 0? Do you have an idea of where we're standing? We're going to ignore the time limit here because she doesn't see a hedge. Okay. Mike says he thinks it's delta. That's this one. So you see there are some little plants there. So this delta is at the end of some kind of hedge. Maybe. Yeah, we're going to time out here, but that's okay. It still lets you continue to select answers even if you time out. But what it will do in the scoring is anything that we answer after the timeout, it won't give us credit for it. It'll count it as wrong even if we select the right answer. So somebody said delta. You guys want to say delta or 0?
0.
Oh, Richard, you don't get to play. You've already played this.
Oh.
Delta's a two-way intersection. The circle's at a three-way intersection. Okay, so you're still going for 0 here. We'll put 0. Richard likes 0 too, and since he's the guy who was in the uniform earlier, you missed the picture of yourself, Richard. Maybe we should listen to him. And then here's the next circle, number 2. Mike says Charlie. Anyone disagree with that? I got another Charlie. Okay, we'll go with Charlie there. This one is a tree on the northeast side. This is something I think that can be very difficult at times if the side really ends up mattering, is that you have to kind of mentally rotate because the control description isn't rotated. It's still oriented to north, but the map is oriented the way you're facing, where north is something different. Okay, somebody says Foxtrot. And then this number 4 is a tree on the southwest side. Somebody says 0. Got a couple zeros there. Here we've got another tree on the north side. We got people seeming to agree on echo for that. Okay. So there's 4 stations in here. We'll do one more, and then we'll probably skip through the last couple so we can see the results. But the other ones are cool because they actually show that one's boring because it didn't have this cool fortress stuff. This stuff all actually has the fortress. So this one is bend in a wall at the top of the bend in the wall. There's one control at the top of a bend in the wall. Is that the right bend in the wall? Are we saying Charlie or are we saying 0? I see 1, 0. 1 vote for 0. Okay, Ellen, I'm going to go with that. And then we've got another bend in a wall here next to the path.
Bravo.
Bravo. Then we've got a wall junction. Ellen thinks 0. Then we've got a man-made object next to the road, which appears to be these things over here. There's a couple of them. So you think that alpha
What are
flag-
those things?
No, it's all fine.
What?
What are those spiky things?
It's an abatis.
It's a what?
Abatis used as a defensive work.
Okay.
Yeah, we saw them in Czechia.
Ellen thinks that's a 0, that's not where the circle is on those things.
I think it's an alpha.
You think it's an alpha?
It's
I'm going to say, I'm going to put, we've got another vote for 0. I'm going to put an alpha in just because, why not? Because we're not really in the competition, and so even if it's wrong, it won't matter. And then we've got end of a wall. 20 seconds left.
Echo.
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 Okay, we're going to skip a couple so that we can get to how the results are being shown here. So after you've finished all of the stations, then it will show you what you chose. Normally, if we're in competition hours, so if the competition has not yet closed, then it will only show you what you just answered, and it won't tell you what was right or wrong. This is a competition that was from December 4th, so it's already closed, so it is showing us which answers we got right or wrong. So that alpha was wrong, and which is part of why I went ahead and did that, because I wanted to make sure we had a wrong answer, and I was pretty sure we were right up to that point with everything. When you've got this up, you can click on it to go back and see what the problem was and also see the solutions. So it tells you what answer you gave, and it tells you what the actual real solution is. So yeah, this hedge is 0 because even though this is on the end of a hedge, that delta flag is really here at the end of this much longer hedge. And so the circled spot is somewhere way back here. Right, you have to follow this hedge back and then find where the other little hedge is somewhere way back there. Okay, and so that's how you play that game and how you do tempo. Any questions? I'm going to go back to my slides. I think I have like one more slide.
The question, when you're doing tempo for, real, does the map show you the location of the viewing station, or do you still have to figure that out?
You still have to figure that out.
But it's supposed to be pointing directly towards the cluster of controls.
The chair will be aimed towards the center of the cluster of controls, and the map will be oriented in that same direction, in the direction that you are looking, yes. But notice, well, we'll come back to it in a minute. But one thing that will happen is the maps are oriented that direction, but because the circle is in the middle, it can kind of shift from map to map. Okay. So I just have this one last slide that has some places to get information if you're interested in putting on TrailO or something like that. The IOF rules, OUSA also has rules which are based on the IOF rules but have not been updated as recently. But for most things, the OUSA rules should be adequate to understand how to set something up. There's a link here to the Tempo simulator and also to an Italian site that people used to use for tempo practice before the Tempo simulator kind of took over. So it's similar, and it still has the stuff that had always been there. So it's just another place you can go to practice if you want to. I'm going to go back to the Tempo simulator to kind of show something about the question about the okay, so see how this map, the circle of the task is always the center of the map. So this map is oriented towards where we're looking, but Charlie's in the center of the picture, and that point is really somewhere further to the right of that. I don't know if we can even see it. I'm not sure what that point is. It might be something up on top of this wall, or it might be a wall that we can't quite see back there. And then when we go to the next map, see, so it's still the north arrow hasn't changed. The north direction on the map is still the same, but the map shifted over so that the new circle is in the center. The old circle had been way further over here, and now with the new circle, the map shifts. So the map does not necessarily match exactly what you're viewing, right? Because what I'm viewing here is kind of centered on the Charlie flag. So unless Charlie is the answer, this map isn't going to look exactly like what I'm looking at. Yeah.
Claire, what would be your thought process of trying to figure out where you are on the map when you first look at it?
So the first thing is paying attention to where you are walking to get to the next station. In a championship situation, they try to block things off so you can't see too much. Somebody came up with this umbrella idea. So these days they use an umbrella. While you walk down the trail, somebody goes with you who has a big umbrella that hides the controls so that you won't see them until after you've sat down. And then after you sit down, people will stand in front of you, and while they hand you the maps, and then they'll suddenly break apart and point out all the controls and say, your time starts now, and you have to go right away. But of course, in a more local or training situation, you don't have to be so hardcore. Now I've forgotten what the question was. How do you know where you are? So one is trying to keep track of where you walked to get there.
Right.
And, okay, I'm on a trail and behind me is this. And the other is usually as soon as they point out the controls, right? So there is a little bit of time while they make sure sort of that you've seen the controls. Somebody will get behind you and point them out. There's Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrot. Sometimes they just say there's 6 flags and they'll point to Alpha and Foxtrot, and you're kind of left to try to find the ones in the middle. But they'll kind of give you an idea of how wide the viewing is to see all the flags. And then they say your time starts. But as soon as the area that you're looking at is revealed, you start looking, so for example, if I'm sitting and I'm looking at this, I'm like, well, look, there's a big cylindrical tower. Okay, chances are that's going to be obvious on the map. So when I look at the map, I'll look for the big cylindrical tower. You have a problem if you're in a place where there's multiple of those and all of a sudden you don't realize that the map is showing you a different tower than the one that you're looking at. That happens sometimes on these virtual things. There are some neighborhoods in Europe that have lots of very parallel, like row houses in New York or something. Everything looks the same. And you're trying to figure out which one is the one that's really on the map. And whether or not the picture is the one that's got the circle. So yeah, I usually try to find something in the terrain that I think I'm going to recognize on the map before they even start my time, so that when I flip to my first map, hopefully that thing is there. Sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes I flip the map and the thing that I thought would be really obvious isn't there or isn't obvious or doesn't look like I thought it was going to be mapped, and I'm kind of back at square one. Maybe then go in the other direction, finding something that looks obvious on the map and say, okay, where is that out in the terrain? You'll find it's not uncommon here, right? Here's 4 stations, 3 of them. The first task is a 0. A lot of course setters will do that. And I know some people who, at least in the virtual orienteering now, if they course set, they try to avoid doing that too much because there are so many people who just assume the first task is going to be a 0 because it's so fun to show you the map and you don't know if you're there or not. And so, so 0 is not uncommon as an answer to the first task. I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover tonight. We are planning, over the next 2 years, we'll do more TrailO stuff, probably in another couple of months, maybe around springtime or so, hoping to have a forum for organizers on, how to set up a TrailO. So if you wanted to put on a course, but we really recommend right now, if you're not familiar, that you go and you play some stuff in the tempo simulator, and that should give you enough of an idea of how this works to be able to put on a tempo if you wanted to. Or at least a demo station, even just a single station at an event so that your club members can try it out. Does anybody have any questions?
Are there any events that the people are tentatively thinking about, at least for next year, that we know of?
We are planning to do hopefully both tempo and prio in conjunction with the Golden State Champs. I've been talking with Rex about that. So that will be in November. I'm also hoping that my own club might do some smaller things, just more locally. We've got a new sprint map of Shabarm Regional Park, which we go to every year just for the regular local meets, and I think we've done TrailO there before, not a championship or anything, but so we'll probably do some TrailO there again now that we have a sprint map of it.
So it has to be a sprint map. You can't use a 1 to 10.
So it's supposed to be, according to the rules, it's supposed to be sprint map standard, but if you're just talking about a local event, it's not uncommon to simply blow up. Back in the early days of this, a lot of people were taking ISA maps and just kind of blowing them up. But TrailO is really best with more detail on the map than an ISA map usually has. So it's nice to at least
I have a,
bump up the area where the controls are.
Claire, when you're going to go in a next presentation about, how you can bring it to events, will you be also addressing of what kind of changes are suggested? I mean, like our club has primarily forest maps, so I can envision the wherever we meet for a meet being an area where you can just alter that piece and put a little bit more detail into it, just to create maybe one station where people, while they hang out, can do that. But will you be having like suggestion of what to best and how to best modify a map to have at least one station?
Yeah, I can do that. I mean, I can tell you I've done it a couple times myself, and usually it's, unlike Footo, TrailO is very hard to plan from the map. You kind of have to go out and see what does it look like, and so typically if I'm doing something, I'll go out and I'll walk the trail that I'm thinking I want for the course and look for where I think would make a good station. And then once I understand where I want to put my stations, then I put effort into making the map more detailed in the area where the station's going to be.
My question was also more like, not like do a whole thing, but like what kind of details to add, or whether just having one area to sprint standards is enough. Because I'm thinking like any club that has not gotten into that would not go out into a whole thing of 4 or 5. I think especially smaller clubs, if they would go into this, is like they would tackle one control for the first time, or one set of controls.
Well, like I said, I mean, in the early days, a lot of people just to train would just, take an ISA map and just blow it up. I mean, it depends what the area is like and how much detail is on the ISA map to begin with. But there are some maps that work just fine that way, especially for beginners. If you've got some buildings and a few individual trees, and you just blow it up and then put controls on some trees and building corners, and that'll work for a beginning course.
Thanks.
Okay,
Claire, I'm
we're
curious.
back. We're a little over an hour. Sorry, one last question from someone?
Yeah, and this might be a good question to address in one of the later sessions about how to set up a meet. I'm curious about any materials that you might have that would help us train wheelchair participants. It's easy for me to see how people who have been orienteering and know contour lines and symbols and all of that can do TrailO, but how would you go about teaching a new participant who's in a wheelchair how to do this?
I will freely admit I have not done very much of that. I've mostly shared with people who are already orienteers, but I have helped them, our team members, when we've been at model events and things like that. One of the things that's been difficult, a good story is that, like you said, we all know things like how to read the control description, so they might not know that. So if it's a local event and you're trying to teach them, one of the things you can do is like the same thing you do for a kid on white. You put in the description not only as symbols but also in text so that they can kind of learn what those things mean. I know we've had people who've gotten mixed up because somebody spent so much time teaching them how to read the control descriptions that they ended up thinking that they were just supposed to look for what control matches the description, and they weren't paying attention to the circle on the map, and so they were getting things wrong. Like here, you know, you've got a wall corner. Well, there's two different things. There's, you know, 3 or 4 things here that are at a wall corner, and none of them is the right one to match the circle. And some of the people in the wheelchairs weren't even looking at the circle because they had been focusing so much on learning how to read descriptions. So make sure people know that they need to look at the map.
Well, there is the one thing that I agree with Stephanie is like, you know, someone that may have done some navigation before may know what a reentrant is, may know what a null is. Someone that is coming in a wheelchair and has not done any navigation before, it almost looks like TrailO needs a way of getting people out into experiencing these things that are on a map that they may have never been able to experience, and now they have to experience. They now have to make decision at a distance. You know, it's like if you don't really get what a knoll or a spur or whatever is because you haven't spent time away from your wheelchair, it's hard to do that at a distance. So that's where one would have to do a little bit more work to make it more adaptive by bringing something out there on the map closer to the participants. If that makes sense.
And so I think to start, when you're just training people, you also want to try to find a venue where there's lots of good features that are right up next to a trail, where it's not looking 100 meters to see the flags, where, you know, okay, here's the knoll, right? Here's a boulder that's, you know, 10 meters, you know, 5 meters away or whatever, so that there's no question about what they're looking at.
Yeah, sorry. With that, we're 6 or 7 minutes over time now, so I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much, Claire.
Okay.
It was enlightening. And we'll look forward to the next TrailO Focus Forum sometime in the spring, probably.
If you go back and look at the very, very early Tempo Simulator tourist stuff, some of those have what's called a B class, which was maps that were designed to be for beginners. So if you're interested in what that looks like, you can go and look at those.
Yeah. Okay, and yeah, good night, everyone.
Good night.